Despite all the animosity we'd seen between them, new New York City Mayor Zohran Mamdani met US President Donald Trump in the White House on Friday. And there was a surprising camaraderie where the two even said they would be working together on New York's infrastructure and housing issues. You're watching Seema Says. And in this episode, this is what The Wire's editor Seema Chishti is going to be talking about first. What was going on there, Seema?
Yeah, crazy day, and the internet had all a weekend to break out and lose it
Absolutely.
completely. But I think it was very interesting. I thought it was very well done, executed by Mamdani, who was clearly kind of circumspect about what he was saying. But I read the entire transcript. He stayed the course. He repeated that he was a democratic socialist. He spoke about how Israel was genocidal in the Oval Office, with Trump nodding. So I think he went there to make a point that he needed to do business with the President of the United States, and he was there as the mayor of New York to talk about it. And Trump, I think there were two things playing on his mind, is what my assessment tells me. One is, of course, that realizing that this guy is popular, and he says that so clearly that there's so much attention here, and so many heads of state turn up, but the number hundreds of you guys are here with cameras. So to never lose a moment, you can't fault Trump on that. So almost allowing Mamdani's charisma to run off on him. So he kind of was part of the party. Number two, I think he also realized that he'd lost. All of these elections were seen as a response to Trumpian policies. The other state elections also that the Republicans lost. So by embracing Mamdani, almost literally, in a way like that, he took away the ideological element that kind of kept them apart and came on board with affordability and other things. So made it, and he knows that the headlines love it. We're talking about it. It's the first topic we picked today.
Yeah.
So I think it was a great moment where Mamdani held his own, said his stuff, and turned up there and spoke as he had to speak. And Trump responded in, I think, it just suits his Trumpian method of surprising, turning things around. And it doesn't really hurt him to speak like that. And he's a New York wala anyway. I think there are lessons here for India. I don't think the government of India would like Trump's embrace of Zohran Mamdani, somebody who, despite being of Indian origin, has not been embraced by the Indian establishment. The Hindu American Foundation has spent money by giving ads and saying do not support him to people of Indian origin or of Hindu heritage. So that I don't think is a great thing for them. Also shows how Mr. Modi's evasion of places of where Trump would be comes out so badly. Here is Zohran Mamdani, a mayor in his 30s, going out to the White House, and it could have actually ended in a Zelensky way for him. But he took the opportunity to do that, and he took his chances. And he batted with a straight bat and came out looking good, clean, and probably will get all funding and stuff that he needs for New York ironed out. There's this other route also that Mr. Modi hasn't chosen, which the other big event, the G20 that concluded, also highlights. We had Cyril Ramaphosa, who's been publicly snubbed. The first G20 summit taking place in an African country, and America chooses to boycott it because on the basis of some fake news that South Africa is going after white South Africans. There he chose to be defiant and continued to have a declaration. He refused to hand over to some junior flunky because they hadn't sent a proper diplomatic person to take the handover. And Cyril Ramaphosa also held his own. So you have two examples globally of Zohran Mamdani and of Ramaphosa. And Mr. Modi and the Indian establishment takes neither. We still seem to be trying to kind of just somehow get on his right side by doing God knows what. And something tells me this may not end very well unless bold steps, clear steps are taken where you come out and say your bit.
Thanks. The next issue that I think we want to hear from you on is the new labor codes that have been notified. They've been pending since 2020, so that's 5 years now, and they've now been notified. We know that some trade unions have called for a protest. How do you see these new laws?
So I think these things are essentially the 4 labor codes are a framework where they overrule 29 laws related to labor. They relate to the 4 codes relate to industrial disputes, to wages, to when factories can be shut down and other social security things. On the face of it, there is all this lip service to we've recognized gig and platform work, etc. But fundamentally what it does is to codify the flexibility. Flexibility has always been used to not privilege labor, to bat on the side of capital. And this kind of tune we've been hearing since the 90s, ever since, about somehow make it easier to sack people and it'll all be good for you. So I think overall, which is why the trade unions are quite angry about it, saying things like there'll be one minimum wage, but we don't know if the minimum wage will be what it is in Kerala or will it be the minimum wage in Bihar. On strikes, they've increased the ambit of what a strike is. So even mass casual leave, if opted for by more than 50% of workers, is counted as a strike. You cannot essentially go on a strike. You have to give notice for a very long time. All that is restricted. There's a restriction on the number of unions that can operate, and a negotiating council, quote unquote, has been set up, which will then negotiate. So all this puts back a lot of things like an 8-hour working day, minimum wages. All this is not because of anyone's largesse. The dice has always been loaded, even pre-capitalism, against those who work with their hands, who have nothing to lose but their chains. But this finally saying this codifies all this under things like, okay, if you're a gig worker, somebody over 40 will have a medical checkup. What meaning do all those small things have if you've actually increased the threshold of workers? So now earlier, if you had even 50 workers, you had to follow guidelines, there'd be a labor inspector, etc. All of that has been pushed to like a minimum of 300 workers. And of course, states have to adapt to this and have their own laws and all that. But generally framing this like this is not filling anybody with confidence. The most important thing about this is also the context. This has been brought in immediately after the Bihar results. If this is so popular and we're so good with for labor, why wasn't this done as part of the people pleasing moves during the Bihar campaign? It kind of smells like the 3 farm laws, if you ask me. Labor unions have not been consulted. This was in 2020. Why suddenly notify just like that? This big bang demonetization type number. We've suddenly, Modi ji has woken up and the 3 farm laws will be accepted by voice vote, irrespective of what's going on. So I think in terms of procedure, in terms of context, it does not augur well. Secondly, to call anything that gives labor a hard time reforms is so bad. I think this post-liberalization, every kind of move, good or bad, is termed reform. Confusing business with the economy. So I think this and also of just making it easier for corporates. 2 small data points in India over the past few years, the amount of tax that corporates pay has been much in percentage terms and in absolute terms is short of what individuals pay. Now that just means that you're skewing the field. Also, corporates have got a tax rebate that hasn't helped. Profits have been doing very well. The share of labor in national income has been coming down. All this is happening at a time when unemployment is high, employability is kind of low. There is a threat of artificial intelligence directly impacting labor. There are also tariffs from US which have directly affected labor intensive industries. So instead of doing something to help them, you do something again that helps crony friends. And it's kind of well known that a wealth inequality that privileges big business does not necessarily, in fact, it does not help either democracies or help your economy. Viral Acharya, former RBI official, has a paper out also about how, because you are really beholden to 5 big corporates, they're able to effect an inflation. Prices are kept high. This is something internationally kind of known, and there's evidence from India on that. So allowing an increasing rate of cronyism, more inequality, and privileging corporates doesn't help. 97% of your workforce is in the informal workforce, and even amongst the formal sector, salaried are only 2/5, if at all, and that pace is either coming to it's either tabling off, plateauing, or it's coming down. So given all this, the context of AI, the threats to labor, the fact that we're a very populous country and the one thing we have is human labor and people, to do this now. There's a protest on the 26th which has been planned too.
Yeah. Okay, coming to our last thing for this episode, which was that in a surprising statement, more than 40 independent filmmakers have come out to say that basically the space for independent cinema in India is really shrinking. And the way they bring this out is the treatment they're receiving from multiplexes, that they're not getting a good show timings, very few show timings, only weekday afternoons and things like that. But a statement like this, Seema, what does it say about the state of Indian cinema today?
Yeah, it's quite sad. And of these 46 individuals that you mentioned who signed up and actually issued a public plea that they should get viewing time, they're some of our finest talents. So India is like very happy to, it's exactly like the women wrestlers thing that when they get gold medals, it's all very well. But in India, they're given a hard time. Similarly, with these independent cinemakers, some of the finest, Payal Kapadia, the director of Agra, and some of our best kind of names who are indie producers have said that till a big guy comes onto them, they get afternoon timings, or it's suddenly, it's all taken off. It kind of reflects, of course, on cinema. and the concentration with the IMAXs and the multiplexes that is going on, and also again, unfortunately, about the state of the economy. I think the Multiplex Association said that this is happening because of dynamic reasons. We pay attention to dynamic things. Now, if dynamic things, which means they suddenly decide to take it off, that kind of so award-winning films, etc., are also not getting a say. As far as theaters go, I think we're at fundamentally an inflection point of what's happening with theater viewing in theaters, which was threatened by COVID. But I think after that, for its own reasons, things have tanked. Cinemas, there were apparently 20,000 theaters in the 80s. It's down to 6,000 or less now. There's a huge concentration of who owns these cinemas. There are multiplexes with very expensive popcorn and chocolates. So any family treat that was a cinema outing in India as mass entertainment, that has suffered a setback. And of course, there was this comical GST that happened on, savory popcorn and sweet popcorn had different GSTs. So you have ridiculous government things there. Some governments, like the government of Karnataka, has tried to cap the price of tickets to 200, but that hasn't really worked. I mean, but PVR, etc., and all say that the average is actually 130 rupees per ticket. But as we know, if you really look at the high end things, it's not less than 250 rupees per ticket, which is pretty unaffordable if 3 or 4 people are kind of going in a group. So I think it's a problem. People don't turn up in cinemas and watch. And there's also been a problem of content. As we've seen, there was no Diwali release this time. Usually films are vying for a Diwali, Eid, the Christmas release as well. These are big celebratory times and people go to the movies. But clearly, that's not happening. And I think independent filmmakers who are doing good quality work, other than having to battle the censor board with like 155 kind of cuts and all that, they have to then battle for screen time. So I think overall, as in something that allows people to give expression to you, cinema being some of the joys of Indian life, other than documenting our truths and telling the story and being there for like years onwards, has taken a beating. And it's bad days for cinema. I think this letter does reflect that. It's beyond just indie cinema makers.
Yeah, absolutely. That's the end of our news analysis for today. So, Seema, what are your recommendations this time?
The recommendations, one is a fairly grim but a very well written sort of review of the former Chief Justice of India, Justice B.R. Gavai, who just retired, a kind of assessment of him by legal scholar and lawyer Gautam Bhatia, which he's done on his wonderful blog. So we'll put that in the show notes.
Absolutely.
And the second thing is a bit Delhi centric. It's for like people in Delhi, but there are 2 exhibitions that I must give a shout out to for all those of you who are in Delhi and breathing the same AQI that we are, can kind of go and visit there and feel good about it for a while. Is this a young artist called Aban Reza, who has a very nice exhibition where she's painted on protest. She's painted on a lot of things that are happening. It's very much political and it's very colorful and it's like quite spectacular and stunning. And the second is Ashish Rajadhyaksha, who's written this encyclopedia of Indian cinema, of Hindi cinema. He's put out an exhibition on posters from Hindi cinema. So that's quite nice. And he's done it quite interestingly. There are like 50 monitors which have different films playing at one time. So it's been done in a very interesting space called Arthshila in South Delhi. So it's a very unusual kind of a new place. So I think both these exhibitions, if you can see, it may be time well spent.
Great. And yes, my recommendation for this time is, as usual, more frivolous than yours, which is
It's almost like design, more fun.
which is the new Now You See Me movie, the third one. It's called Now You See Me, Now You Don't. I personally love heist movies. I think they are funny and ridiculous, especially after seeing the Louvre heist, where clearly you don't need to do all of that. You can just walk in and walk out. So, but no, it's fun. The second one, I think, had left some people disappointed, but the third one is as good.
Heist it is.
Yes. That brings us to the end of this week's episode. If you have questions you want Seema to answer, please leave them in the comments and she'll get to them in a future episode. Thank you so much for watching.